Great, we've got a full house. Okay, welcome everyone. Hello, and today we've got the Politics Project research launch, starting powerful conversations, lessons on political contact from the Digital Surgeries programme. So my name is Rosa Slater and I am programme lead at the Politics Project, and we are really excited to have you all here today. So thank you so much for coming and supporting our work. Just to start off with a little bit of Zoom housekeeping. We'll have the chat box open for general comments that you might have, and there's also Q&A function. So that will be open for questions, and we'll have time at the end for questions. So just pop them in there and then we will address them at towards the end of the event. Great, so I think Ian, if you're just gonna share screen and we'll get up the presentation. Okay, perfect. Hope you can all see that clearly. To the next slide. So we've got a QR code which you can scan to view the report in its entirety, and we'll also pop the link to it in the chat. So yeah, if you're keen to dig a bit deeper and hear a lot more about it, then you can read the entire thing. And then also, if you want to post about today's event, we are on social media. At Politics Project, as you can see there. So please feel free to tag us and stuff, and you can use our hashtag, which is #StartingPowerfulConversations. So now I'm very happy to pass over to Baroness Merrin of Lincoln, who is Shadow Health and Social Care Minister and Shadow Department of Digital Culture, Media and Sport Minister in the Lords, who we're very excited to have welcome you all today and just speak a bit about her experience in taking part in a digital dialogue session.
Thank you very much, Rosa, and welcome everybody to this online event this afternoon. And the reason I'm speaking is because I've probably been identified as a complete devotee of the work of the Politics Project, and I'd like to say a few words about why that is. And it's because it works. It's that simple and that complex. I've been so impressed at the professionalism, and on that point I have worked with Rosa, who I can highly commend to you, as well as all the members of the team. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Hattie and all of her team for the work they do for creating conversations between politicians at all levels and young people. It's so impressive. And why does it matter? Because I think today in particular, and these days, people find it very easy to say, oh, I'm not interested in politics, or it's all boring, or they're nothing like me and I don't understand it. And I think what the Politics Project does is kind of blow that out the water and say, actually, these are conversations we should all be taking part in. And politicians, whether they are in the House of Lords, the House of Commons, or they are local councillors or wherever, they are there and speaking up on matters of importance to you. So I love the way that it works. I have to admit, I was absolutely amazed to find out that, and this is the reason I think it works so well, and that's the amount of preparation that has to be put in by those who are going to be asking their questions and crafting their own questions to politicians. And 3 hours, you'll hear more about this later, but 3 hours of work is a lot of work, I think. But I was particularly impressed and amazed to find out that 1 hour, up to an hour of that was going to be research into me. I don't think anyone's ever done research into me for an hour, so I was very flattered. But actually the serious point is, it means that when the politician comes together with young people, that it's like they've met already. And the questions therefore are informed because those asking the questions know about the person who's their guest, but also about the place that they operate in my case, in the House of Lords. And also there's been a discussion of issues. So people come warm to the conversation, and that's why it's got so much meaning. And I hope that through the work the Politics Project does, people will feel inspired, not just to take an interest in what affects them, which is probably everything around us, but they will take an interest in those who are in place, who speak up, perhaps on their behalf or about issues relating to them. And they will see the difference that can be made for good, for indifferent, or for ill, and want to influence it. And perhaps some people might even want to become politicians. I very much hope so. But whether people do or not doesn't matter to me. What matters is they are engaged, they are alert, and they are challenging. And so for me, the Politics Project has done that. And one final thing. I had thought that it wouldn't work so well because we weren't in the physical room together. But actually, I found that being online was just as good, and in fact better in some ways, because I could fit it into a very busy schedule and devote myself to the time, but also that I could speak. I spoke to a school that was at the other end of the country to where I was, and it's no issue. And so I'm very glad you're all here today. You've got a fascinating presentation ahead of you, because I heard it yesterday and was very taken by it, and inspired myself to continue my work in the House of Lords. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much for those really kind words. We are very grateful for your support. And as you just said, now we're going to pass over to the Politics Project team, and we're going to speak through our research findings with you. So I'm going to pass over now to our director and founder, Hattie Andrews, who will introduce the project.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rosa, and thank you to everyone who's joined us today to hear about our report and our research. So for any of you that don't know, we are the Politics Project, and we are a democratic education and engagement organisation, and we have been working across the UK for the last 7 years. And this report, the findings that we've pulled together today, is kind of a culmination of everything that we kind of want to share about what we think is important in youth political contact. And I just want to start by setting the scene to kind of explain our journey and how we ended up working on youth political contact. So about 5 years ago, we were really drilling down into and trying to understand what it was that was preventing young people from feeling like they could engage in politics. And we knew there was something about political knowledge and understanding. We knew there was something about confidence and feeling able to speak. But we also knew that there was something about relationships. And we knew that young people didn't feel like they could engage with political institutions, that they didn't feel like political institutions were for them, and that for a lot of the time they didn't feel like politicians necessarily were people that they felt like they could approach and they could talk to about their issues. So we started a journey of trying to understand how we can build relationships between young people and politicians to break down some of those barriers between young people and politicians. And the way we started to do that is through looking at how we could improve some of the existing interactions that we knew already took place. And the one that we've really focused on through the Digital Surgeries programme, which we're going to be talking about today, is reinventing, if you like, the politician's school visits. And we chose that as an option because it's probably the most common form of political contact that happens across the UK, but also because it's a form of political contact that we felt like was a little bit of a missed opportunity, that we knew quite a lot of, from sitting in the back of them, quite a lot of politicians, young people and teachers didn't really feel like they were getting everything out of those engagements that maybe they could. So we started a process of really thinking about and redesigning that engagement. And what we're going to share today is hopefully some of our learning and some of our findings on how to make political contact as effective as it can be, and also hopefully ask some questions about where some opportunities are for us to move forward and make improvements together. So I'm going to pass you over now to our head of programs, Ian Pope, who's going to just give you a quick introduction to the program itself.
Thank you, Hattie. The Digital Surgeries program aims to transform the way that political contact happens between young people and politicians. Our aim, as you'll be able to see on the screen, once I move to the next slide, is a simple one. We want every young person to have a meaningful engagement with a politician during their time at school, and we hope we can do that through the Digital Surgeries program. So young people are connected to politicians using video conferencing platforms such as Zoom and Teams, and we hope this gives the student a really simple and easy way of engaging with politicians, leading to better understanding and relationships between both. Over the last 3 years, in partnership with the Joseph Rowntree Charitable Trust, we have delivered 252 dialogue sessions. Through those dialogue sessions, we've worked with 185 local, regional and national politicians. And those politicians in turn have spoken to 6,416 students, 155 teachers across 121 schools across the UK. The program itself is very simple to deliver. So step one, our teachers undergo training so they know how to prepare their students for the digital surgery itself. Step two, the teachers will then deliver 3 or more hours of preparatory workshops using our resources that we've provided. While they're doing that, we at the Politics Project will be approaching politicians that the school have highlighted they particularly want to speak to, local politicians or perhaps politicians within the House of Lords. And we will be working out a time that's suitable for the school, suitable for them, and booking them in. Step 3, we have the digital surgery itself, and that is usually facilitated by someone on the Politics Project team. And then finally, it doesn't actually finish with the digital surgery itself. Finally, many digital surgeries will actually lead to what we call a pledge. So that is commitment by the politician to take action about an issue or a question raised by the students. And then we will work with the teacher and we'll work with the politician to ensure that that pledge is fulfilled. And that is the Digital Surgeries program. I'm now going to hand you back over to Hattie.
Thanks, Ian. So what we're going to do now is we want to share some of the key findings from the report. So some things that we think are kind of noticeable that we've kind of unearthed through a mixture of us looking at student data, politician data and teacher data, but also some of our reflections of our journey of doing this work. So hopefully some nuggets that will be of interest to you all. Before we do that, I just want to set the scene a little bit in terms of what we mean by political contact. So when we think about what you can get out of political contact, we particularly look at 4 different outcomes. And Ian, do you mind just moving the slide on for the outcomes? Thanks. So the 4 different outcomes that we think you can get out of political contact, or that a lot of people aim to get out of political contact, are building political knowledge and understanding, improving RSC and confidence, building trust and relationships, and supporting advocacy and student voice. And we've been able to demonstrate across our programs that all of these outcomes are really achievable. But a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is that you need to kind of design for these outcomes, and that they don't really happen by accident, that you can't get there by accident, and that the way that you deliver political contact and the support that you give around political contact is really crucial for designing for each of those outcomes. And we normally recommend people focus on 1 or 2 of these outcomes and really try to achieve that in your political contact activities. So with that scene set, I'm just going to pass over to Ian, who is going to talk us through our first key finding, the power of local.
Thank you, Hattie. Yes, so we have found that political contact with local councillors is just as impactful as contact with national politicians. And actually that contact with local councillors is more likely to lead to real world change. So when we are approaching our teachers to see which politicians they would like to speak to in their digital surgeries, it would be true to say that often teachers will ask us to prioritise approaching peers or MPs first before local councillors. And I think that comes from teachers sort of feeling that peers and MPs are more likely to have a higher profile and perhaps are considered seen as more senior politicians. This kind of perception changes though once teachers have gone through the programme and worked with a local councillor, and they really then see the value of students engaging with local councillors and understanding more about local government. Many of the issues that young people are passionate about, that are concerned about, are local issues, and councillors are often more able to take direct action on those issues than their colleagues at Westminster. We see that earlier on I mentioned the pledges, and of all of the pledges that we deliver, 81% are actually done by local councillors. So we really see this power of local as a fantastic opportunity to drastically increase the quality political contact. If just 1 in 5 of the 20,000 local councillors in England were able to go on a school visit or take part in a digital surgery, we could work with every single secondary school in England. So a really clear way of illustrating the power of local councils and their ability to improve political contact. I'm now going to hand over to Hattie.
Great. So I'm going to talk to you now a little bit about politician demographics and the impact of politician demographics. So when we got all of our data through from students and politicians from all the sessions that we've done, one of the things we wanted to explore was what the impact of different types of politicians, ages of politicians, what difference those sorts of demographic changes made on student outcomes. And the reason we wanted to explore this is that we think there's some kind of pre-existing ideas about what types of politicians potentially are most effective at engaging with young people. And we know a little bit about this from, again, talking to teachers about kind of who they sometimes will ask us for and what their preferences will be. So we wanted to just look at our data, and we're just going to share with you what our data shows around the impact of politician demographics. I think something to just say at the beginning here is that this is just a snapshot from our data, and that we'd want to work with other academics to kind of back up these findings before anybody kind of does anything too drastic with them. But we just thought we'd share what we discovered. So I'll just run through these with you. So the first one is that we looked at the role of the politician. So we looked at whether they're a peer, a councillor, or an MP. And we looked at the impact of that on a range of different areas of student impact. And we found that across quite a few different variables, peers were leading to a little bit more student impact. So councillors and MPs were about the same, but peers were slightly higher. So there's something that the peers are doing right. So that's just a kind of interesting finding. The next up, we have the age of the politician, and we were particularly interested in exploring this one, given that we specialise in working with young people, and there's often quite a feeling that you need to be as close as possible in age to a young person to kind of effectively engage with them. But actually what we saw in our across a range of factors is that between about the ages of 30 and 60, there was really very little difference at all in terms of the outcomes if the politician was in that age group. There was a little bit of a drop off after those ages, but within that 30 to 60 range, we really didn't see much of a difference. And then the third one where we did see quite a significant impact was on the gender of the politician. And we saw that female politicians were achieving slightly higher outcomes than their male counterparts. I have a personal theory about why this may be, which could be that it's connected to the way that we frame some of our questions. So a lot of them were about kind of feeling supported or feeling cared about, and so it could be connected to some sort of existing tropes about kind of feminine tropes. So it could be about that's where some of that bias could be coming in. But as I said, we would love to work with academics to kind of explore these ideas further, because some of them were slightly kind of counterintuitive from what we thought they might be. Then the two other areas that we also looked at, but we really didn't see any particular trends, were the impact of the political party that the politician was from. So we didn't see that that really had any impact at all. And we thought that was interesting, because sometimes there is an expectation that certain people with certain views are going to be more effective at engaging with young people than others. And then the other one we looked at was ethnicity, and we didn't see any evidence that the ethnicity of the politician had any particular impact. And I think within ethnicity, one thing that's worth noting is that we also looked at the impact of what happened if you kind of paired up students with politicians from similar backgrounds to them. And again, we didn't really see that that had any impact at all. And we thought that was an interesting finding, because sometimes it can be one of the things, again, that people kind of intuitively do is to pair people up with politicians from very similar backgrounds to them. But from our research, at least, that doesn't seem to have a huge impact on student outcomes. And I'll pass over to Rosa now.
Thank you, Hattie. So the next thing we're going to speak about is about letting students lead. So we consistently find that the best interactions happen between young people and politicians when sessions are entirely student-led and the discussions are formed from the curiosity, interest and passion of the students that are taking part. And we found through running all these engagements that there is a big range of types of questions that are asked, and often wanting to get the most out of the experience and really build student knowledge. Teachers can sometimes think that the best route is to have a constant stream of very serious policy questions to the politician, but we find this only works well when students are really engaged with those issues at hand themselves and are asking questions that they've come up with themselves. So we have had some really well-researched questions, which you can tell straight away the young people have worked really hard preparing for the session, and will often get feedback from politicians saying how great the questions are. So to the next slide is an example of one of these questions. So you've traveled to Vietnam and Bangladesh and said you experienced the climate crisis firsthand. How did that influence you? As you can see there, that's a question asked where they'd put a lot of time into thinking about thinking about the person they were going to speak to. But if you look to the next slide, as you can see here, we've been actively encouraging teachers to have students ask more informal questions. So if you're singing karaoke, which song would you choose? So this can allow students to find common interests with politicians and creates a more relaxed environment, which puts everyone at ease and builds trust. So now we just want to play for you a couple of our favorite examples of these interactions.
Where is it you shop and what's your favourite meal deal combo?
Where is it I shop? I tend to shop wherever is the easiest to pick something up if I'm racing in between different meetings and events. So if I'm getting off the train, I will pop into Marks and Spencer's by the train station. And I'm a prawn cocktail sandwich person with a Diet Coke, and I tend not to do crisps. So yeah, prawn cocktail sandwich is like my fave.
Thank you, Jane. Rebecca, do you have another question?
I did have another question, but it was kind of answered before. So she's got a little backup one.
Okay, great. Fire away, Rebecca.
Yes.
Do I have any pets?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to show you Just bear with me 1 minute. Okay, I'm ready.
Okay.
Can you see that pet?
We certainly can.
So hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight into how digital surgeries can help build positive relationships between young people and their representatives. So now I'm going to pass back to Ian, who will speak about the effect of group size on sessions.
Thank you, Rosa. Yes, one of the most striking findings of our work was how big the impact of the size of the group of students that you work with has on outcomes like student confidence and building trust and relationships with politicians. We found that students in large groups, that is groups of over 40 students, had small or sometimes negative changes in relation to these outcomes. I'm just going to show you some graphs here. So agreement with the statement, politicians care what I think, only increased by 4% after a digital surgery. That's with a large group of students. And again, large group of students actually became less likely to agree with the statement, I trust politicians, after meeting a politician. But from the graphs, you can see for those smaller groups, we actually see a really positive correlation between meeting a politician and the impact on I trust politicians and politicians care what I think. This suggests that politicians taking the time and to engage with those smaller groups can have a real big impact. The reasons why we don't see that same impact for large groups, well, one of the things it might be is that just simply that larger group just allow less time for conversation, less time for discussion, less time for questions. And then because of that, students end up feeling less engaged. This, we feel, is a particularly important finding simply because so many schools, the way they do political contact is by inviting politicians in to speak to large group of students in something like an assembly. We completely understand why this is done, because obviously this is quite a quick and efficient way of getting a lot of political contact done in one go. Unfortunately, events like this may actually be perpetuating a perceived power imbalance between the young people and the politicians. Large group events can perhaps further entrench the view that politicians are hard to engage with just by the fact they don't allow that time to ask questions and to have that discussion. I'm now going to hand back over to Hattie.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. So I'm going to talk to you now about the importance of preparation. And I think if there's one thing we feel incredibly strongly about at the Politics Project, it's the importance of the prep work that we do beforehand with the students. So for a lot of young people, when they engage with a politician through our programme, but through almost any engagement they do at school, it will often be the first time they have ever spoken to a politician. They're really unlikely to know very much about that politician. A lot of young people won't know very much about the kind of area or type of politician that they're speaking to. And some of them won't even really know what a politician is or understand the role of a politician at all. And if you don't do any work to support a student beforehand, then you're really starting kind of from scratch at quite a low base at the beginning of that conversation. So what we do at the beginning of our work is students do 3 hours of preparation before they talk to a politician. So they have an opportunity to practice and start to kind of enjoy talking about social and political issues through a whole load of games and activities. They get the opportunity to learn about the level of government from the politician that they're going to be speaking to, so they can understand their role and understand the sort of things they're responsible for. And they get the opportunity to research that politician and, really importantly, craft their questions and craft whatever it is that they're gonna, whatever format they want to use for talking to the politician, so they can really feel like they are in charge of that conversation. And I think two things that kind of stood out to us, I think, when we were looking through our student data, is how strongly it came across that the students themselves really, really enjoyed this preparation, and how much it added to their feeling kind of secure, and feeling like they'd balanced out some of that, the issues with power between young people and politicians, through feeling prepared and through feeling ready for those conversations. We didn't expect young people to say, I absolutely loved coming up with questions. We thought they'd find that maybe a little bit boring potentially, but actually we found it was something that came across really strongly that they really enjoyed doing and taking part in. So yeah, if there's one thing we can really recommend you to do, it's that preparation beforehand with your students. And I'm going to pass over now to Ian and Rosa, who are going to talk a little bit about advocacy and impact beyond the classroom.
Thank you, Hattie. So as you can see here, 1 in 5 digital surgeries that we deliver end in a pledge. And so that means the past 3 years that we've been running this stage of the programme, we've recorded 55 pledges from politicians. And so Ian mentioned it briefly earlier, but what we mean by this is when a politician offers to take an action on behalf of students. So this could be anything. It could be a really small thing, such as signposting students to council resources. It could be really big, really small, but just demonstrates the meaningful changes that politicians can make, which improve everyday people's lives. So we also find that pledges don't happen without a lot of thought and effort coming from all parties that are involved. So for example, the students, as Hattie's just explained, need to be very prepared and make sure that they're asking a question that is really relevant to the role and responsibility of the person who it is they are asking it to. But then also from politicians, they need to be really thinking about creative solutions that can help solve problems that students are bringing up, and think of really different and unique ways in order to amplify the student voice. So we do find that political contact has great potential to support youth advocacy, but young people need support in order to be able to translate those conversations into real life change that creates impact beyond the classroom. So I'm going to pass over to Ian now, who will tell a story about a pledge.
Thank you, Rosa. Yes, so this pledge was made during a digital surgery with Queen Elizabeth School, which is a school in Devon. The session was with some sixth form students, and they were talking to their local councillor, Frank Lech. And I think we have a nice picture of Frank here. Frank sits on the Children's Scrutiny Committee for his local council, and a student asked a question about, young people in foster care, and the fact that many young people in foster care are often moved around several different homes in quick succession, which leads to a lack of stability for them. So quite a difficult issue, quite a tricky issue to solve. Essentially, the question was, what can be done about this? So Frank said that he would contact the education officer at the council, which he did, and he asked the education officer to commission a report into the current situation with foster care in the local area. This report was then presented at the full council meeting to see if there was anything that could be done to improve some of the problems that the system had. Frank, in his capacity as well on the Children's Scrutiny Committee, said he would continue to follow up with this issue going forward. So a complex issue, an issue that hasn't got perhaps many easy answers, but I think what did happen from the digital surgery was that the profile of the issue was raised, and it was put on the council's radar, and then you've got a local councillor, committed to continue to look into this through their role as a local councillor and on the Children's Scrutiny Committee. And I think the young person who asked that question really felt a sense that he was being listened to and his concerns were being taken forward. I think now Rosa has a second example.
Great, thanks, Ian. So on to the next slide. Cool. So this is, I'm going to also like to share an example which took place in a session that I facilitated last June in 2021. and it was with Councillor Jan Goodeve, who is actually listening right now. So it's a great story, and it's great to have her with us today. So what happened was a class of year 9 students at Simon Bull School in Hertfordshire were taking part in a digital surgery, and during the conversation, the issue of students not having access to enough places to hang out in a safe environment near school with their friends after school and during lunchtime. And when we dug a bit deeper, it seemed like a good solution to this would be in order to have more picnic benches set up nearby. And so it was really exciting. Jan promised that she'd look into the feasibility of more being able to be installed. And then by the end of the same month, she'd already confirmed with me that accessible benches would be added to the play area of Hartham Common. So if you're ever at Hartham Common, look out for the picnic benches, because yeah, those were created due to the result of a session. So it's really great to see the impact that young people speaking with their politicians can have in resulting in better representation. And so now we'd really like to hear from another one of our incredible partners that makes results like this happen. Just a quick note to say that we were meant to have some students and a teacher come along today, but there's been an emergency at school that the teachers had to deal with. So unfortunately, they won't be with us today. But we're really excited now to introduce Councillor Sean Stevenson McGall, who is Chair and Member Advocate for Engagement with Students at Bath and North East Somerset Council. And he's going to give us a bit of a local government perspective on engaging with school students and taking part in the Digital Surgeries programme. So over to you now, Sean. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'm just hopefully going to share my screen now. So is that shared for everyone? Yep. Okie doke. So yeah, so as I said, Councillor Sean Stevenson McGall. I've been a councillor for a long time, too long. And what I thought I'd just talk about is most councils within their corporate strategy would say they want to engage with people, or all residents in a better way, because all councils know that we don't do it as good as we could. And in Bath and North East Somerset, we have increasing numbers of older people who tend to vote, and we have increasing numbers of students, and sometimes other young people who aren't students get left behind in those debates and conversations within our council in terms of priorities and issues to deal with. So in our framework, like I said, the purpose is that we provide a lot of services for young people, but sometimes we don't hear the voices of young people who those services impact upon. And having these digital surveys is one way, surgeries is one way we can do that. We want to give people a bigger say, and we want to prepare our communities for the future. And again, young people are obviously the future, and we need to make sure that they have a better voice in that decision making. So we say we want to give our students a better say, and in our community engagement charter as a council, we set out what we think is how we should do engagement with different communities across the council, whether it's in different villages and towns or in the city of Bath, or if it's different ethnic or age groups. But these standards apply both to the officers, but also to us as local councillors. And I think sometimes local councillors forget that they have to understand their demographics within their community and understand the different needs of different aspects of their communities, of those individual wards they represent. And it is our job as local councillors to work with the third sector to actually engage with those harder to reach groups. And I think in this context, young people are a part of that. So it was a great way for me as a local councillor to be involved with the Politics Project. So just a bit about me. I moved to Bath as a student to go to university, got involved in student politics, and have never left. I was first elected last century at the age of 28, and I was the youngest councillor on the authority at the time, and now I'm in my 50s. We have had some councillors in their teens, so elected at 19 on the council, and that has helped over the years when we have had younger people on the council. I helped set up our democratic action for Baines Youth in the early 2000s, where we were trying to systematically get more feedback from students across who were at school age across our towns and villages across the area. And the area that I represent, Oldfield Park, is a split between long-term residents and students from the two universities and Norland College. And that's where Hayesfield School, which is where I did my digital ward surgery with, is based. And that's a mixed, a girls' school with a mixed sixth form with about 1,400 students from across the entire city. So I participated in 2 of these sessions, and the main reasons why I wanted to do this is I find it very hard to hear those diverse and underrepresented voices. I can go and knock on doors, I can speak to them, but I fall into the trap of only speaking to the older residents. You know, a student of, I don't know, 13, 14 opens the door, and I automatically go, can I speak to mum or dad? You know, I don't ask them what their priorities are for their area or things like that. I want to speak to the adult. So I think this was a bit of an eye-opener there for me to think about how I work as a local councillor. And we do know that different demographic groups have different views on issues, especially as people grow older, their views change, and people have different priorities in terms of their expectations of what's most important issues to them, depending on their age. We don't have that relationship that people used to have in terms of politicians and young people. People just read the mood music around and they think that all politicians are the same. But when you start to actually meet people, especially as your research has said is in smaller groups, that helps break down those barriers and can lead to real change. And the final thing that got me out of my comfort zone, I'm used to I work at a university, I'm used to dealing with 18-year-olds plus who are half my residents, long-term residents, but actually sitting down and listening and talking to younger people when I don't have children myself, I think it was a bit of a challenge and got me outside my own personal comfort zone. So it's quite hard to actually get into schools nowadays. For local councillors sometimes, especially like myself, you work full-time and council meetings can be really boring for young people. I know they're boring sometimes for us as councillors. I have to chair full council and it can be quite boring. So actually getting in to schools through this programme has been really good. I think the support that they got in preparing the questions, understanding who they were going to be quizzing and talking to has been very helpful. And as you said, I think that has built the confidence amongst the students to ask more probing questions rather than just turning up and doing that. And as I said earlier, it helps me to be a better representative of the community that I represent, not just those on the electoral register who are 18 plus. And I've changed my personal behaviour now. So when I knock on the door of my residents' homes in Oldfield Park and a younger person answers the door, historically I would have just said, can I speak to mum or dad? But now I at least try and have a first conversation with that younger person about what their priority is or what do they think the main issue is in their road, in Oldfield Park, in Bath that needs to be tackled before, you know, they probably get pass me on to their parents anyway. But at least in my head, I've realized that, you know, younger people need to have that voice and I shouldn't just dismiss it if they open the door and talk to me when I'm doing my canvassing, so to speak. I think the highlights for me is that because the groups were quite small, I think we had about 15 to 20 at Hayesfield School, it did allow everyone to have a conversation and they felt part of that debate and there was to and fro. It wasn't just a one-way sort of like me answering the question and then there was silence. We actually had a debate there about some of the issues and I thought that was very interesting. They knew who I was and where I was coming from and what issues I thought were important. And again, for me personally, the question is where they were highlighting and focusing on the climate emergency, on inequality, diversity, and inclusion issues really hard for me for the future in terms of that, because I don't always get that from some of my longer and older residents within the area. And one thing which I am hard about putting in here in terms of the highlights, but also the surgery highlighted and reinforced the conflicts I have between two different groups in my community that I represent. I have the students at the universities and I have the students at school. And actually they come into conflict because of how the geography, the bus routes and the road layout works within the area. So we have hundreds of students queuing in the morning to go to the universities, blocking the pavements. And the girls who are going between the two sites of Hayfield School are forced to walk into the road. So this is really quite dangerous. So this is really highlighted, and it came up in the surgery. It's something we need to do something about as a council. So one of my pledges is that as we move forward with our livable neighbourhoods programme, low traffic neighbourhoods programme as Bath and North East Somerset, I've put in a submission on the back of this to look at making safer routes to school between the two sites of Hayesfield and trying to reduce some of that conflict between some older young residents, i.e. students of university age, but also the pupils and the students who go to the school. So those are some of the highlights that I found from doing the digital surgeries. And I just hope that we could do this in the future, every secondary school in Bath and North East Somerset with every ward councillor, because as you say, the data that you show nationally shows this has a great impact. And I just think we need to scale this up locally and nationally. So thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Sean, for that glowing endorsement. It's been, really interesting to get your unique perspective, and we're really grateful. So now, if you, just stop sharing the screen, we're going to go back to pass over to Hattie.
Great, thank you, Rosa. And I think we don't need the slides anymore. I think we're probably done. Yeah, great. So just to finish off, the way that we just want to end before we've got a couple of minutes for questions is that, so I think Rosa, Ian and myself, we've all delivered over 100 digital surgeries each, and we wanted to just finish by sharing kind of a key reflection from each of us about this work, something that might not necessarily be in the report, but something that we feel like is really important when thinking about and delivering political contact work. So I'm going to go first with my reflection. And my reflection, again, it slightly comes back to those outcomes that we were talking about at the beginning. But it doesn't matter who you are, if you're a teacher, if you're a youth worker, if you're a politician, if you're a student, if you're in some way getting involved in political contact. And one thing to really think about before you do it is just think about why you're doing it. That it isn't kind of an end in itself. You normally need to go into it thinking, I want to find out about this, or I want to learn about this, or there is a reason why I'm talking to and I'm engaging with this group of people or this person. And we find that when people have a really strong why, when they can answer that question beyond just, I'm head of sixth form, so I bring people into talks or something like that. A lot of that work that we're talking about in terms of preparation and supporting people just naturally falls into place. So if you want a guiding principle and how to do political contact well, it's just really identify your why, and then that will really help you to make sure you get something really solid out of every engagement. And I'm going to pass over to Rosa for her reflection now.
Thank you. So something that has struck me from all the sessions I've run is how beneficial it is for us to encourage two-way dialogue during the sessions, and ensuring that politicians can also ask students questions. So I do think one of the best and most common pieces of feedback that we get is from politicians is how much that they learn themselves in the sessions as well, how much they learn from the students. And so I think that is like a really special thing, that we shouldn't overlook. And I'd like to share an example of a really great question that prompted an interesting discussion. So during lockdown, a politician asked a class, like, how have you found education has changed since COVID-19, and what differences would you like to see to the schooling system? And I think this just really highlights how important it is, a bit like what Hattie has just said about encouraging politicians to think in advance. Who is it you're speaking with? What unique perspective could you get from who you're talking to? And how could you use the opportunity to take maybe even similar steps to the ones that students are doing beforehand, in terms of doing research about the person they're speaking to in advance, and yeah, who are the young people you're meeting with, and what are the topics that they'll be invested in and that are going to affect their future. So just don't doubt how much of an impact you'll be making by speaking to young people and having their voices heard. Now to Ian.
Thanks, Rosa. Yeah, so my reflection comes from a digital surgery I delivered autumn last year, I think it was. It was with a group of Year 7 boys at the East Manchester Academy. They were meeting their local counsellor, and it had been a great, although quite lively session. And we had sort of getting towards the end. There was a sort of sense that we were just about keeping things on track, and as we were doing our thank yous. And right at the very end, one of the boys put his hand up and just said, "Can I just say something?" And I won't lie, there was a slight flash of panic that went across the teacher's face. But then the student just said, and I'm going to read what exactly he said. He said, "At the start of doing this, I thought it was going to be really boring, but actually it's been pretty good, and now I like politics." And I think pretty good, you cannot get much higher praise than that from a teenager. But what it really illustrated to me was the positive impact that political contact can have on any young person. So just like Rosa and Hattie, I've delivered lots and lots and lots of digital surgeries with school councils, with students who are doing A-level politics. And those are great sessions. Don't get me wrong, they're fantastic sessions. But those young people, I think, probably are very likely to have political contact outside of the digital surgery program. They're going to meet politicians anyway. But ensuring that all young people who are not interested in politics, young people who don't see any real connection between politics and their lives, the kind of young person who may probably wouldn't be asked to do the tour around the school with the MP, making sure that those young people get the opportunity to have political contact, I think is so important. Not only will those young people learn more about democracy and politics, but I think it will really build a connection with their community. And that's it for me. I think I'm going to hand back over to you, Hattie, just for, I think, our closing part.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got about 5 minutes left. So we've got time for a couple of questions. And I'm just going to pick out a couple that have come through in the chat. So I'm going to go to Hannah's question first. So Hannah has asked about, from the pledges that we look at, how many of those have been actioned, and do we support students to hold these pledges to account after the sessions? So we actually set up the pledges process kind of hopefully to answer this question in itself, because one thing we wanted to kind of try and demonstrate and encourage was almost the worst thing that can happen is a politician offering to do something and then not doing it, that's really problematic in terms of building those relationships. Not every single pledge is fulfilled, but we do take on that role of kind of chasing and trying to support politicians to follow up. And really importantly, actually, to feedback, because a lot of the time politicians will take an issue that they've discussed with young people, and sometimes they will go off and do something on behalf of that, but just often logistically, because they've kind of moved on and they're on to the next thing and they're very busy, they won't always have the opportunity to go back and explain what they've done and what has happened. And in terms of what we mean by pledges, I think we're not always expecting it. We don't see pledges as kind of like a list of things that politicians would like to do that then a politician goes off and actions. It's all about, sometimes it might just be, I will have a conversation with somebody about how they do that thing so I can learn more about it. Sometimes a pledge can be, you know, a small action that they can do. And we really, really do try to encourage as much as possible for politicians to report back, and actually to report back even if they're not able to do something. And that's really important. And again, it's about kind of understanding kind of this realistic relationship in some ways, about how to support this dialogue and see politicians as being people who potentially are slightly more on the side of young people than I think is kind of commonly felt. So that's that question there. We've got a question here about 16 and 17-year-olds working in Wales. And we should say this report mainly focuses on our work in England, but we do a huge amount of work in Wales as well. And we'll have a whole other report coming out on our work in Wales next year. So we absolutely love working in Wales, and we really, really enjoy working with members of the Senedd. I'm going to pass this one to Ian, actually, because he leads on our work in Wales to answer how Votes to 16 has had an impact.
Thanks, Hattie. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't think it has really made any impact whatsoever. I couldn't say there is any real difference between the surgeries that we've delivered with students in England who aren't able to vote compared to the sessions we've done in schools in Wales where students are able to vote. It doesn't seem to have any real impact at all. I suppose the only thing we do find in those Wales sessions is politicians are very interested to know if the young people have actually voted or not in the recent elections, and how much they kind of perhaps know or understand about the Senedd or their local council. But beyond that, I couldn't say it's made a difference at all. We still get the same kind of topics, same kind of interest, same sort of passion from the young people. It's no real difference.
Yeah, I would just add to that one small change there is that I think we probably find schools are more up for working with us in Wales, because they see that there is that they see kind of democratic engagement and education as more of a responsibility now that more of their students can vote and get involved. So that's one difference there. There's a question here from Sasha, which is about so we've talked mainly about secondary and kind of mainstream education. Are there any plans to expand beyond that to primary or into mainstream? And do we do any work in non-school settings? The answer is yes. So we do quite a bit of, we've done work in pupil referral units. We've done work in schools with that specialise in working with special educational needs, and we do have a programme that works in primary schools. And actually, some of our favourite work takes place in primary schools. Within primary schools, we only work with year 5 and year 6 students. Sometimes we'll work with year 4, but mainly year 5 and year 6, and that's just kind of where we've decided to draw the line in terms of engagement. But we have actually 60 hours of resources working with that you then craft your 3 hours from. So we've got lots of different resources for people of different ages and stages of their time at school. In terms of working in what we would call kind of non-formal spaces, like the youth work sector, it's something we're really keen to explore and to do more of, and it's kind of a next step for us. But it's something that we think is really, really different, and the amount of we really, really value supporting people for the right place and the right stage, and so we wouldn't want to kind of jump into that too lightly. So I think if anybody's up for exploring that with us, we're always up for that conversation, and we'd be really interested in that. But it's something that we'd want to go through the kind of same process that we've done to working in schools, to really understanding the setting and understanding how to get the most out of these engagements before we kind of jump in and design, because we think there's some really exciting opportunities, but you need to design for it in a kind of completely different way. You need to work in a very different way. So yes, but not quite yet, if that makes sense. Great. I think that probably draws us to a close. So we're pretty much out of time for questions. So I just want to say a massive thank you to all of you for coming and to listening to us talk about the reports. A massive thank you to Sean for sharing his experience and spending his time with us today. today, and to Baroness Merrin, who kicked us off and shared her experiences of working with us on digital surgeries. I also want to say a massive thank you to Rosa, Ian, and the rest of the Politics Project team for all of their fantastic work on this programme and pulling it all together. They've done an absolutely fantastic job. And also to all of the students, teachers and politicians that we work with on this project. It really is a team effort, and it's, you know, what keeps us kind of interested and excited by this work is all of those conversations that we get to witness and sit in and listen to. So please follow up with us. We'll follow up by email with a copy of the report, and please feel free to get in touch with us if you've got any questions or any kind of interest in the work. We're always very happy to have that chat. So yeah, just a big thank you from me, and hopefully catch up with some of you soon.